Beth Adan here. I am here with the NisonCo Cannabis Industry Roll-Up YouTube series. And today we have Sam Darkangelo from Headcount's Cannabis Voter Project. And he's here to talk about what they're up to right in voting season as we head into the general election of 2020 and what you can do to get involved and why voting matters. So thank you so much, Sam, for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me, Beth.
Yeah, we are happy to. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about Headcount, Cannabis Voter Project, and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, sure. So Headcount is a voter registration organization that's been around about 16 years, primarily known for registering voters at concerts and music festivals, generally targeting young voters, also doing a lot of voter registration online by leveraging the social media followings of entertainers, artists, primarily musicians, to get their followers registered to vote. Cannabis Voter Project is an initiative that Headcount launched a couple of years ago with the intention of reaching the cannabis community in the same way that we've historically reached the music community. And so we really aim to register, inform, and turn out voters who care about cannabis reform.
That's great. And obviously, COVID-19, we don't have music festivals right now. Things have shut down. Voting's moving to mail. Do you want to talk a little bit about how those changes are affecting your registration process?
Yeah, I mean, at Headcounts and obviously, our big plan going into the summer was to do sort of what we've always done, which is register voters at festivals like Bonnaroo, Lollapalooza, on tour with artists like Ariana Grande. We were supposed to go on the road with Green Day, Harry Styles, artists like that. But of course, none of those events ended up happening on account of COVID. And so Headcount and also the Cannabis Voter Project, because we were going to be at a number of events this summer as well, had to kind of rethink our voter registration efforts and switch to a much more digital-centric voter registration operation. And there were a lot of worries about that when the pandemic first started, but now Headcount is looking at by far its best year ever in terms of voter registration numbers. We've already registered more than 400,000 people to vote. We might even cross that 420,000 number. I don't know, but as of now, we've got over 400,000, and we went into this election cycle with a 200,000 person voter registration goal. And so really pivoting to digital has been extremely effective in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to reaching young people who largely, are kind of existing in this digital space. In terms of mail-in ballots, it's been an interesting thing that's happened. Many states have really increased the level at which mail-in ballots are going to be a thing this election. So a lot of our messaging, both at Headcount and at Cannabis Voter Project, has focused on walking people through that mail-in ballot process. And if you look at a state like New Jersey, for instance, where cannabis legalization is going to be on the ballot, they've switched to a primarily mail-in ballot election. And so that creates some challenges. Mail-in ballots have always existed there, but it hasn't been nearly this large of a portion of the electorate that is going to be using them. So there's a lot of challenges in terms of educating people around mail-in ballots. In fact, yesterday, 3 weeks before Election Day, was our unofficial, send in your mail-in ballot day. We've been telling people to get those mail-in ballots in as early as possible, because one of the challenges that comes with mail-in ballots are that there's a number of ways in which your mail-in ballot cannot be counted. And the most obvious is if it arrives too late. And so we told everyone, if you're actually mailing that ballot in through the Postal Service, go ahead and get that thing out as soon as possible. But in most states, most counties, there are drop boxes. People can bring their mail-in ballots to their county clerk's office. So we're also, highly encouraging people to do that, to bring, use one of those direct methods to drop off their mail-in ballots. But from state to state, there's a ton of different things that go into the mail-in ballots. The process of actually filling one out and sending one in really varies extensively from state to state. So in some states, there's a secrecy ballot or an inner ballot, an inner envelope that you need to put your ballot in. And then that envelope needs to go inside of a larger envelope. And that larger envelope needs to be postmarked, needs to be stamped in some states. And in some states, you don't need to put a stamp on it. It'll already go out. And so there's all these kinds of intricacies, where you sign, how many times you sign, the color of ink that you use to sign the ballot. These things change from state to state. So it's been a pretty heavy lift to educate people about these different things. Headcount actually put together a great website. It's headcount.org/makeyourvotecount. And we break down every single state, the most up-to-date, accurate information of how to get those mail-in ballots in such a way that they're going to be counted. Because this summer, hundreds of thousands, over 500,000 mail-in ballots were rejected during the primaries because of things like signature mismatch. In a lot of instances, your signature needs to match what it does on either your driver's license or on your voter registration that you did, and that's kind of a strange thing because a lot of people don't know exactly how they signed that one time, And so there's signature mismatching. There's all kinds of technical things. This wasn't sealed properly. You didn't put the envelope inside the envelope. You didn't use the correct ink. All a number of ways that ballots can be rejected. And so if you're going to vote by mail, we're highly recommending that you make sure that you know every single possible detail of how you need to fill out that ballot. And at this juncture, now that we're less than 3 weeks out from the election, we're recommending people, if they're going to vote by mail, bring those ballots to a drop box or bring them to a county clerk's office or another election official's office, where you can just give them directly to a person. Because as a lot of people know, there have been some issues with the U.S. Postal Service this year. And so relying on the U.S. Postal Service to get that ballot in there in time may not work out. So yeah, a lot of stuff when it comes to mail-in ballots, which is a pretty unique challenge with regards to COVID.
Definitely, yeah. There are a lot of moving pieces that people might not know about.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how people you're registering and who should vote?
Well, we strongly believe that everyone who's eligible should vote. That's a big part of what we're doing. But at Headcount in the Cannabis Voter Project, we largely target young voters. It's young voters who are often not showing up, who are eligible to vote and are either not registering or not taking the time to go and vote on election day or vote early, whatever method they want to choose. And so we really believe that young people should vote. At the Cannabis Voter Project, we strongly believe that people who care about cannabis policy should vote. And one of the reasons why we started this initiative is because when you're in this line of work, you run into a lot of people, particularly young people, who have a mentality of like, does any of this matter? Why should I vote? Who cares? Things like that. But when you look at cannabis policy, in the way that cannabis policy has moved forward in so many states in the last 7-8 years, it's very clear that voting has been one of the primary things that has moved this forward, whether it's ballot initiatives legalizing cannabis in a number of states or medical cannabis, or whether it's legislatures taking a much more pro-cannabis tone after legislative shakeups, electoral shakeups. It's been voting, and it's been people who have moved this issue forward. And so we strongly believe that people who want to see cannabis policy move forward should be active and informed voters. And we made a website. It's cannabisvoter.info, where you can go and find out where every member of your state's congressional delegation stands on cannabis reform. You can reach out to your lawmakers, send them an email, and let them know where you stand on cannabis reform and ask them where they stand on cannabis reform. You can also learn about the various ballot initiatives that are going to be on the ballot in 5 different states this year. We've got 4 states voting on legalizing recreational or adult use cannabis. And then we've got another 2 states that are voting on medical cannabis as well. And so, in those instances, cannabis is directly on the ballot, but we like to say that cannabis is always on the ballot. Every single year, there are going to be legislators who have different views on cannabis. Your governor might have the people running for governor might have different views on cannabis. So your vote can always be used to impact cannabis policy. And we made that website in order to kind of keep all these resources in one place, help people make decisions for themselves about who they're going to vote for if they want to move cannabis policy forward.
That's so clear that is the ballot. And that's an amazing resource. I've poked around there. It's very interactive. You can really see what's going on. How can people tell if they are eligible to vote?
Well, in most instances, if you're an American citizen who's over the age of 18, you are eligible to vote. There's a couple states that have rules regarding people with felony records and whether or not they can vote, or certain stipulations that need to be met before they can vote. And you can go ahead and check those out at headcount.org. Has some resources where you can find out about the felony voting rights. But generally speaking, if you're over the age of 18 and you're an American citizen, you can vote. And you can go ahead to our website at cannabisvoter.info or at headcount.org. We have tools where you can go and check the status of your voter registration and make sure that you're registered to vote at your current address. But if you're not, you need to go ahead and get registered. The deadlines have already passed in many states for this election, but also many states you still can register to participate in this upcoming election. So, yeah, you're eligible to vote if you're over the age of 18, you're an American citizen, and you have registered. That's an important step. You do need to register to vote. It's an important part of the process, and so it's really crucial to make sure not just that you're registered to vote, but that you're registered to vote at your current address. And one thing I'd like to add about that is that, many states, for a variety of reasons, will purge people from the voter rolls in between elections. And some states, it's, if you haven't voted in the last 2 elections or 3 elections or whatever, you get removed, and so you have to re-register. So if you haven't voted in a little while, it's absolutely crucial to go ahead and just make sure that you are still registered to vote at your current address. And if you're not, go ahead and get that done as soon as possible.
Very good point. And a lot of people have moved because of COVID, switched addresses. So make sure that you're registered in your current address.
Totally, especially if you've moved to a different state, but even if you've moved to a different address in the same city that you've always lived in, you still need to re-register at that new address.
Yeah, great information. So a lot of people have been saying, that they don't think their vote counts. They're worried that it kind of just goes off into the abyss. What would you tell people about that?
Well, that's great. Headcount actually at headcount.org, and I don't have the exact URL on me, unfortunately, but we have a new resource that we put together called How to Talk to Your Friends About Voting. And it really just breaks down a whole number of talking points about different ways that you can talk to people who say things like, their vote doesn't matter. And as I was saying earlier, look at cannabis policy. You look at Colorado, Washington, California, Oregon, Massachusetts, Maine, Michigan, all of these states, cannabis policy has moved forward because people went and they voted for it. And there's no way that you can tell someone who thinks cannabis is an important issue and be factually accurate and tell them that voting has no impact on this issue. 30-something states now allow medical marijuana, and a sizable portion of them, that was done at the ballot box. Just now you've got Mississippi, one of the most conservative states in the nation, is going to be voting on a pretty solid medical marijuana program this year. And so, there's no reason that anyone, especially those who care about cannabis policy, could ever say that voting doesn't matter.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm from Washington State. I remember back in 2012, no one thought it was going to pass. Obviously it did. And that was because of the power of the voters and the people.
Oh yeah. And Washington and Colorado, you guys kind of set off a chain reaction too. Other states were able, I know California tried in 2010. There was a bit of pessimism, if California can't pass this in 2010, then who can? But then Colorado and Washington came on and they got it done. And it proved to kind of all these other states that this is something that can really move forward. And in fact, this year we actually have Montana and South Dakota, both fairly conservative states as well, that are voting on adult use recreational marijuana legalization. And if it passes in those states, I think that's going to be kind of a game changer for cannabis reform activists. It kind of says, if you can get this thing on the ballot, it's got a real chance of making it over the finish line. And so even in the most conservative of states.
Yeah, that's really going to set an interesting precedent for sure. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Sure.
Sam, why do you personally vote? What's important about voting to you?
God, yeah, that's such a complicated, such a big question. Obviously cannabis policy is important to me, but a number of issues are important to me. And, I'm an American citizen. People have, fought very hard for my right to vote over the centuries. And so it's just an essential part of doing my civic duty. And, I think it was 2017, the Virginia legislature, the control of the Virginia legislature was decided by a single vote. And so, especially when it comes to these local elections, your vote can have a huge impact on how things go. And, this isn't the only way that I make my voice heard as an American citizen, but it's honestly one of the easiest ways and one of the most crucial. And so, I vote because countless issues are important to me, and because this is, the best way to exert that right as an American citizen and help move these policies that matter to me forward.
That's great. And I think there is an impression that it is difficult, or there's a lot of hurdles to jump through. So I'm really glad that Headcount and Cannabis Voter Project are working to make that simple for people. So thank you so much for sharing about that. Is there anything else that you want people to know?
Gosh, if you live in one of the states where a cannabis initiative is on the ballot, there's no excuse for you to stay home, especially if you're a person who thinks that this is an issue that should be important to you. This is obviously a historic election. A lot is really at stake. And so, there's really no excuse to stay home. And when you're talking to young people, it's kind of this interesting thing where people will say, well, nothing ever changes, so why should I vote? But if young people voted at the same level that older people voted at, I assure you things would change a lot more quickly than you realize. And so, if you're going to get, one vote this, one vote that, don't think about one vote. Think about your entire generation's vote. It's not just about you voting. It's about your friends and your family voting. It's about the people around you voting. And so, that whole voting doesn't change anything mentality, it would really blow up if everyone, 18 and older, between the ages of 18 and 30, made sure to go out and vote every election. So
I would totally agree with that. Yeah, definitely go vote if you want to hear, you want your voice heard, you want cannabis legalization to move forward, any issues that matter to you, highly recommend. We'll make sure to link Headcount's Cannabis Voter Project in the description of this video. Stay tuned to our YouTube channel. We're going to be posting more videos like this and talking about the issues that matter. And contact NisonCo if you want to reach out about PR, marketing, or SEO assistance, or just talk about the cannabis industry in general. You can reach us at nisonco.com. Thank you.
Thank you.